Hello, Ellie here from Thankful Flow Yoga. Thank you so much for joining me for another video in this January YouTube series. Hopefully giving you a nice taster of what to expect on my membership. Now today we are going to be moving forward to the second chakra, Svadhisthana. So having a look into this hip space. So on the last video where we did a flow, we looked at the first chakra, Muladhara, at the root, and now we're moving up to Svadhisthana, which is located in the hips and the sacrum area. So this chakra is a center for creativity and love. But there's also a lot of processing and storing of emotions that go on in these areas, especially in the hips. So sometimes these practices can bring up all sorts of emotions as we open through the body. So just really keep observing and accepting what comes up. I would always recommend after a practice, taking a little bit of time if you can to kind of process, maybe journaling, and really kind of just honoring what comes up as much as you can. And so I'd recommend having a strap today for this practice. If you don't have a yoga strap, then you can use something else equivalent, maybe a dressing gown tie. That usually works really well. Most people have one hanging around the house somewhere. So have your strap to hand and bring it and place it to the side of you on the mat. And we're going to come into a lying position to start the class. So come into a lying position on your mat, have your strap by your side, and we'll take a moment to ground. And reconnecting to, if you did the video before this about the yogic breath and equal breathing, using some of this here, so starting to come back to these three different parts of the breath. So really feeling the breath in the chest, the abdomen, the belly, or observing where you can feel it, if it's in any of these areas. Noticing how the breath feels today, if there's any restrictions, any blockages, or maybe the breath feels really smooth and free. No right or wrong, being in a place of awareness. Allow your hips and your shoulder blades to really sink into the mat. Surrender your full body weight to the ground beneath you. Start to step into being the watcher of your thoughts here, observing. And then start to slowly take some movement into the body, bringing the soles of the feet to the mat, bending the knees. Feet are roughly hip width apart here. And start to bring the strap into your hands. We're going to hook the strap around the sole of the right foot. So the ball actually across the ball of the right foot. Make sure that your toes can still move. And then start to lengthen the leg up towards the ceiling. Doesn't mean that the leg needs to be straight, just finding some length, finding a stretch here. Slide your hands down the strap until your arms meet the mat. And then option to lengthen through the left leg here. This might intensify the feeling of the stretch slightly. Or keep it bent if that feels more stable. And then slowly start to guide the foot maybe in towards the body. That's just an option. It really depends on how your leg's feeling as you initially came into the stretch. You may not need to be guiding it in closer to you. You might already be really feeling the stretch where you were, and that's okay. Breathing here. Coming back to those deep breaths. Filling up the body. Being gentle and kind to yourself, mentally and physically. Releasing any expectations that you could be putting on yourself about this practice. Start to bring the strap into your right hand and guide the right leg out to the side. So you're really opening up into this hip space now. So externally rotating the hip and engage the right leg and the right glutes to help support you here. This doesn't need to be a really big range of movement. Remembering that we're really early in the practice. So really just warming and stretching into the legs. So keeping that in mind, coming to a place before your limit. Start to guide the leg back to neutral now. And take the strap into the left hand. Keep your hips grounded and guide the leg over to the left. Until you can feel a deep stretch here through these muscles that are supporting the hip joint. So possibly through the glutes, the IT band, the piriformis. Make sure that your hips are not lifting away. So this movement's really coming from the leg, moving over to the left, creating this stretch. And this is an alternate range of movement to what we would quite usually do with these muscles. So this is a really important part of the stretching. Quite often when we think about stretching through the hips, we think of an external hip rotation, opening out, which, yes, that's a great stretch, but we also need to work with stretches where there's an internal hip rotation as well. So this one can feel quite intense. So really breathing into it and sending the breath to that area, to your hip space. Start to bring the leg back to neutral. Release the leg from the strap and let your right leg drop down on the mat. Pause for a moment and observe how the right leg is now feeling. Sometimes it can feel a bit longer than the left leg now that we've stretched out the right leg and hip. And then from here, start to bend the legs again. Start off with both soles of the feet planted on the mat. Bring the strap around the ball of the left foot this time. Press the foot up towards the sky, finding length in the leg. Doesn't mean it needs to be straight. And then slide the hands down the strap. Maybe you're then lengthening the right leg. Option to use the strap to guide this left leg gently in towards you, increasing the stretch. That doesn't mean that this is where you need to be. Remembering that how your body's feeling today, what your body's doing today is going to be different from yesterday or tomorrow or next week. So letting go of expectations, letting go of any shoulds, and just really refocus on it being in this state of the as is, accepting the as is, being rather than doing. Start to bring the strap into the left hand, guide the left leg out to the side, getting an opening through the left hip space now. Groin, take some engagement in the left leg, the left glutes to support the hip joint. Breathing here. It's very common for one side of the body to feel and act very differently from the other. So remembering that what you did on the other side could be very different, and that's okay. And that's actually a really common thing. Slowly start to bring the leg back into neutral. Bring the strap into your right hand. Hips stay grounded. And use the strap to guide the leg over to the right. Small range of movement. Come until you can feel the stretch in that hip space. Breathing deeply into that area of the body. Send your breath there. Slowly start to bring the left leg back to neutral. Release the leg from the strap. And drop the left leg down on the mat. Pause for a moment and observe. You can close the eyes as we take a couple of breaths here, grounding into the mat. And then when you're ready, start to roll over onto your front. Or make your way over onto your front any way that you need to. And we'll come into Sphinx Pose. So elbows roughly underneath the shoulders, palms of the hands on the mat, gaze coming forwards. Thinking about creating this space across the chest. Light engagement through the legs and the glutes. Breathing here. So this is a gentle opening in the spine, gentle spinal extension. And then from here, start to tuck the toes under and see if you can engage through the core. So ignite through the core and start to sit the hips back. You can walk the legs in slightly. And from here, start to come onto the hands, but keep the hands walked out in front and start to melt into your Anamahasana puppy pose. So hips are above the knees. And then we're melting the forehead and the heart down towards the mat. Breathing here, opening through the heart and the shoulders, the cervical spine, this upper part of the spine. And slowly start to walk the hands in slightly. And then see how it feels to bring your knees out to the side. So bring your knees wide here, coming towards the edge of the mat. And sit your hips back towards your heels from here, coming into a wide leg child's pose. Opening through the hip space again. If this isn't comfortable for you, you can come into your narrow leg child's pose instead here. And then really melting the belly, the chest, the forehead down towards the mat. Surrender your body weight to the ground beneath you. Feeling your breath through the back body, the sides, the belly. Taking as much time. Bring the knees back in together. And start to walk the hands in towards the body and slowly make your way up so that you're in this kneeling position on your mat. Hips have come away from the heels. And you could always pop a blanket here. If your knees feel quite sensitive when you're in tabletop or kneeling, use whatever you can around the house. So you could use a blanket, for example here, underneath the knees to support you in your practice. So really sometimes getting creative within reason and using what you have there. And then start to bring the weight into the right leg and bring this left leg out to the side. So I'll show you from here. So coming into gate pose. Now, if this is feeling super wobbly for you, you can actually lower the hands back down to the ground and you could work here, feeling into the stretch through the groin and this hip space. So that's a lovely modification that you could take here instead. If you're up here, thinking about seeing if you can shine the toes towards the ceiling. So we're externally rotating the hip. And then bring your hand to your left thigh, palm facing the ceiling. Inhale, sweep your right arm up to the sky, lift your ribs away from your hips. As you exhale, come into a stretch here. And this left hand is maybe sliding down the leg as you come into the stretch, but not compromising any space across the chest. Keep imagining that your heart is really shining towards the ceiling. So again, thinking about whether this needs to be a smaller range of movement so that you can really have the alignment in the pose. Feeling a deep stretch through the right side body, through the leg and the hip space. Slowly start to come up from the stretch. And again, you can bring your hands down here to transition onto the other side, or you can see if you can work with some balance and stability, bringing that weight into the right leg, bring the left leg in. Don't worry if you're wobbling, falling all over the place. And then coming onto the other side, so bring the right leg out this time. If your foot needs to stay sideways and grounded to the mat, how mine is now, then that's okay, that's absolutely fine. But see how it feels if you can to bring those toes away and have the thigh pointing up to the ceiling. This for some of us will work deeper into the hip space. Place the right hand on the thigh, palms facing the ceiling. Inhale, reach the left arm up to the sky, lift up and out of the waist. As you exhale, come into the stretch. Gaze and heart shining towards the ceiling. Breathing here. Try to keep breathing freely. Notice if you're restricting the breath. Notice if you're holding any tension in the face. Really try and relax the face and the jaw as much as possible. Inhale, float back out of the stretch. And then again, option, either bring your hands down, or if you want to have a bit of fun here, bring the weight through the left leg Seeing how it feels to hover this right leg in. So coming back to tabletop position for everybody now. So shoulders above the wrists, tuck your toes underneath, and on your next exhale, send your hips to the sky for your downward facing dog. Remember, you could take another child's pose here, if that's what you're feeling for. Ground the hands into the mat, come up and out of the shoulders. Lift the hips to the sky. Belly button's coming in towards the spine, and you can come up on the toes as much as you need to. The legs don't have to be straight either here. Main priority is the length through the spine. So if you need to bring your heels away and bend your knees, but you're finding more length in the spine doing this, then take that option. And then from your downward facing dog, start to walk the hands into and start to curl the body up to standing with a rounded spine, taking as much softness through the legs as you need to, slowly working your way up, head and neck coming up last. And then we're going to return back to a pose that we did in the first video of this series. So you might be starting to get familiar with it, or it could be already in your yoga practice. Coming into malasana. So bring your feet slightly further than hip width apart, toes pointing out. I'll work through the different options for malasana. So hands in prayer position, Anjali Mudra, heart center. Start to bend through the knees, coming down slowly. Active malasana. Forearms come to thighs. Supported malasana with the block. Seated malasana, bringing the hips down to the mat, completely resting your hips and opening here. Or traditional malasana with your hips hovering above the mat. Just remembering this is very, very strong place to be on the ankle joint and the knee joint. So if there's any kind of feeling that does not feel right or good, then really listening to that and thinking about one of the other options, taking a different option there. So once you're in your malasana, engaging through the roots, so coming back to Muladhara and Mula Bandha, so engaging through your lower abdominals, through the core, but also thinking about the muscles at the seat of your pelvis. And then working up from there to Svadhisthana, which we've been looking at today. So this hip space, the hips and the sacrum. So really opening through this space. The body, just like the mind, stores lots of memories, lots of different things. And sometimes this gets stored up in the body as tension. And in an energetic sense as well, can cause blocks through our energetic channels. So really opening into these different spaces and releasing things that are not serving us is and can be a really great part of this practice. So keep reaching, crown of the head to the ceiling, making space in the spine. And then when you're ready, we'll start to release from malasana. So bring your hips down to the mat if they're not already, and release the legs from your malasana position. And start to bring the soles of the feet in together and allow the knees to drop out to the side, finding bound ankle position. And again, you can always use blocks to support you here underneath the thighs. And start to rest your hands around the ankles. Find a neutral spine. Lift the crown of your head to the ceiling. Inhale, make space. Exhale, start to come forward into a fold. Lengthen spine, so leading with the chest. And sometimes when you come into a pose and we're moving forwards in a fold with a lengthened spine, sometimes it's just as beneficial to be up here in your neutral spine and be working here in the pose in your lovely alignment, rather than coming into the fold but having to round through the spine or to kind of prioritize the depth of the pose above the length and the strength of the spine. We always want to put the length of the spine first. Of course, there's some folds where we are actually rounding the spine, so that is different. But for this bound angle forward fold, we're keeping the length, and then we'll come into butterfly with a rounded spine next. So keep thinking about making space on the inhale, releasing on the exhale. Inhale, start to come up from the fold, and keeping the soles of the feet together, bring the feet out further away from the body, creating more of a diamond shape with your legs. Now you can get your rounding of the spine here. So the forehead is coming towards the feet. That's a gesture of where it's heading. We'll still inhale first and lift the ribs away from the hips. As you exhale, allow the spine to round and drop the head down towards the feet. Inhale, start to slowly come up from the fold. You can use your hands here to guide the knees in together. Take a gentle window wipe with the knees from side to side. And then we'll come down back to our lying position to have a short Shavasana to finish the practice. So to get down there, plant soles of your feet on the mat, knees are bent, reach the fingertips out in front, engage through your Mula Bandha, your root lock again here, engage through the core, and thinking about from this space, then lowering the spine down to the mat, seeing how slowly you can bring the body back down, staying strong through the core, and releasing onto the mat. Start to lengthen the legs here, or if you tend to get aches and pains in the lower back, in the lumbar spine, I would recommend giving a reconstructive rest position a go instead of this lying position. So instead of the lengthened leg lying position. So this involves bending the knees, bring the soles of the feet to the outside edges of the mat, and then drop your knees in together. And what this does is brings the lower spine closer towards the mat and can feel more supported. Start to close the eyes or take a steady gaze. Bring the arms out to the side, palms of the hands facing the ceiling. Start to surrender your body weight to the mat. refocus your attention on your breath and where it's traveling to. Take a moment to observe any thoughts, any feelings arising. Really noticing what is alive for you today. And as we observe the breath, observe the inhales and exhales, even doing this for as little as 60 seconds, can lower the stress hormone within the body. So giving yourself this time to practice, to notice your breath throughout your practice, can have so many benefits, can really connect you to the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest part of the nervous system where healing and balance takes place within the body. If your mind still feels quite busy in your Shavasana, just remember that that doesn't mean that you're not doing it right. That doesn't mean that you're not gaining the benefits. Really being aware that your mind is quite busy still, or maybe it's not, but the awareness, noticing this, being the observer of your mind and your body is being in Shavasana, is part of this practice. Slowly, when you're ready, start to bring yourself back into the physical body, taking some gentle movement, perhaps in the hands or the feet. And then slowly make your way up to a seated position on your mat. When you're ready, keeping your eyes closed. Slowly start to open your eyes, taking a steady gaze. Thank you so much for joining me in this practice, working into the hip space. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know how you're getting on with this January series. Comment below, share your practice with me. And I can't wait to see you for the next row.